Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I am Bill, the company's expert, and you are here where I make all your dreams come true, the stuff of fairy tales. Yes. We are going to get into this. I'm going to put my foot down with a firm hand, and the title of today's episode is Don't Make This Horrible Mistake in a Job Interview. We are going to talk about that. The subtitle is Attention Introverts. Doing this will eliminate you instantly in a job interview, a common mistake that many job seekers, especially introverts, make. So we are going to talk about that today. And this is primarily a Q&A. So if you see my beautiful face with my perfect hair, in the vicinity of that, there should be a chat box. Get in the chat box. Let me know if you have any questions about job interviews, resumes, hiring, discovering jobs, anything like that. I'm here to help. Before we get started and while I'm waiting for questions to roll in, thank you to, first of all, everybody who's here, the participants, anybody who gets in the chat and asks me some questions, and also to my Patreons and my channel members and my super thanks donors. So anybody who gives a super chat or super sticker, because those are kind of cool. If you do, I guarantee you a full and complete answer to your question, no matter what. Yes. So let's get into this today. There are 19 people here. Thank you for joining me. You guys are awesome. It is Canada Day in Canada today, and it's miserable outside. If you've never heard of Canada Day, that's okay. Nobody has outside of Canada. We just celebrate the fact that we're a country. So if you don't know anything about Canada, just remember, we always dress up like we're the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. We live in igloos, we drive dog sleds to work, and we snuggle up next to polar bears. That's all you need to know. It's like you're a native. Okay, now let's talk about the title of this. What's the big mistake? This horrible mistake in a job interview. Well, this plagues mainly introverts, and it's the idea that a lot of people are kind of unaware that you are making a first impression when you are in a job interview. And it's hard to be objective about ourselves. And when you throw in another wonderful ingredient, which is that you may be provoked in a way, they might ask you stupid questions. They might not be super professional all the time, or they might not really be down with proper manners. This has been known, okay? If you're dealing with recruiters, hiring managers, other types of interviewer, this is a thing. And this happens more than you think. And on top of it, sometimes recruiters may even do this stuff intentionally just to see how you react. The horrible mistake is to show negativity. That's the horrible mistake. You would be surprised how many people don't realize this and how like this eliminates a lot of people. Okay. Like I said, it's hard to look at yourself objectively and get the point of view of the recruiter, someone who doesn't know you, someone who is just meeting you for the first time. And they're going to form their opinion of you by the very first thing you do, the very first thing you say, and this kind of thing. So the choice of what comes out of your mouth first and how you present yourself matters a lot more than you think. Okay. Also, if you weren't aware of this, here's what's actually going on. Job interviews are not about technical skills. They're about your soft skills. They're about what you're like as a person. You see, the way it works is that before a job interview, you've sent in a job application with a resume and stuff like that. That's about your technical skills. That's where they evaluate you on paper. Do you seem qualified for this? That's where technical skills are the deciding factor. In a job interview, usually what you're walking into is a situation where they're talking to several candidates, and all of those candidates on paper are fully qualified for the job in their opinion. Okay, so that's what you're walking into. So you're not really competing on, who's qualified or who's the most qualified, because most qualified really doesn't matter when you're hiring an employee most of the time. They want someone that's qualified, but they don't need an absolute genius. They want someone that's affordable, someone who will stay, someone with the right attitude. Those things matter a lot more at this point, okay? So job interviews are really about soft skills. Now they want to see what you're like as a person, okay? So the kiss of death is not being 100% positive all the time. Now, I'm sure a lot of people hearing this, a little part of you dies inside because this is cringeworthy. It really is. Trust me, I get it. I'm a technically minded introvert, and my flaw has always been that I keep it real a little too much. I don't suffer fools gladly. I know that's the case with a lot of other people, and this really works against us. So if you're that type of person, this is going to be a real issue here. And if you've had a lot of interviews but are never selected, this could be what you need to fix, what's maybe not working very well, and you need to fix. Okay, what do I mean specifically about not being positive? Okay, showing anger. Okay, they ask you something stupid, right? Showing frustration. Pretty much the same thing, right? You're frustrated with the process. You're frustrated by what they're asking you, what they're saying to you. Maybe they're being rude. Things like this. Or being pessimistic is another one. Or being offended by something. And unfortunately, we have to try and suppress this kind of thing in a job interview. You're making a first impression, and if the first thing that happens is you get offended, that leaves the impression that, oh, this is a person that gets offended easily, and they get offended by anything, right? We all know that's not true, but that's how it looks. So this is why we need to pay attention to this stuff. And this applies to the entire experience, right? So including body language, things like that. If you go there and you're like, kind of like this, already that says something to what I think about this interaction, right? So the whole package, you got to be positive, you got to be polite, you got to be professional, even if they're not, okay? Now, I know what some people are going to say. They're going to say, well, to hell with this. If someone is kind of rude to me, it's like I'm going to be rude to them. I'm not going to take that kind of treatment from these clowns. I get it. I totally get it. That's how we all feel. What you should be aware of is that sometimes, like I said, they intentionally do this stuff to get a rise out of you. There is something called a stress interview. And largely, these are not as popular as they used to be, like 20 years ago or more. But they still exist. And some of the principles apply. They are still practiced. They are still valued. They haven't fallen from favor. Those values that lead to doing something intentionally called a stress interview are still regarded by recruiters and recruitment theory. And so sometimes they will do this. Sometimes hiring managers do their own sort of informal version of a stress interview where they, intentionally ask you tough questions or questions that, they're trying to almost frustrate you to see how well you are at handling frustration. They want a demonstration of how you can handle that kind of stress. Because let's face it, you work in a workplace and you're going to be frustrated occasionally. Some jobs more than others, but dealing with that in an appropriate way is all part of being a good employee, right? If you're the type of person that flies off the handle and starts to get violent, in the workplace, that's obviously got to be a problem, right? So they want to look for signs of that. Incidentally, safety, which is part of HR, sometimes I think it shouldn't be, but it actually is. Technically, safety is part of HR. When it comes to studies on violence in the workplace and stuff like that, what the theory says that is currently recognized and adopted is that a lot of little incidents lead to a big incident, right? Statistically, if you have a lot of little incidents, people getting frustrated, people yelling, people throwing things, that's an indicator statistically that, you're going to get a major incident. You have a fight or something in the workplace. So So sometimes they intentionally look for this. And so they're not actively necessarily discouraging recruiters from stressing interviewers a little bit. That's not really a priority because it kind of tells them something that they regard as valuable. Okay. So that makes this issue all the more important for everyone to know. Thank you to the 20 people that are here. There's nobody in the chat yet. That's interesting. Usually I get some stuff by now, but anyway. Okay, so let's get into this. You may feel insulted since some of the questions that they may choose to ask you, it seems like they're not familiar with you. One would think that if someone has invited you down to their workplace, their office or something, because they say, we would like to talk to you, we'd like to interview you, one would think that they would know who you are and why they called you here, right? And sometimes, I'm sure, for people who've done a lot of job interviews, you know what I'm talking about. You go down to the job interview and they don't remember who you are. Like they remember your name, like, oh yeah, I have a meeting with this person. But they don't remember who you are. Like, okay, you're applying for this job, but I don't remember anything about them. I don't remember anything that's on their resume. I don't remember what it was about them that made me decide to call them to come in for an interview. I don't remember any of that. I'm totally unprepared for this interview. So they get in front of you and they put their resume usually on the table in front of them. That's the one kind of thing. If you're conducting an interview, you usually go off. If you know nothing about the other person, like, here you go. This is a guide to who they are. This is a guide to what to ask about. You've got a whole gold mine of things that you could ask them about. You could ask them about every single item on their resume and tell them, and ask them like to explain each one, right? So they'll look at your resume, but they don't know it. That could be a source of frustration. It seems almost insulting. If you don't know who I am, why did you invite me here? It seems insulting. So that can lead to a bit of frustration. They can also ask you idiotic questions. They have no knowledge about the job that they're hiring for. This is a common thing. If you're talking to a recruiter or any other type of interviewer, maybe a director of HR or something like that, they're hiring you to be, say, a mechanic, but they themselves know absolutely nothing about what a mechanic does, or, they're putting the screws to you about how you're qualified to be a mechanic when they themselves don't know anything about being a mechanic and what a mechanic does. That can be frustrating too. You say a bunch of things that they don't understand because they've never heard of it. They might speak to you in shop talk, like that's a lingo that's particular to that company, thinking that you'll understand it. And when you don't, they kind of look disappointed at you, and you're thinking like, this is a no-win situation. What are these words you're throwing around, right? That's another common situation too. There's 1,001 reasons why you could be frustrated with the interviewer. Some of them are just downright rude and unprofessional. Just going by the comments on my YouTube channel, a lot of you guys have, endured some pretty unprofessional and rude behavior from interviewers. So this is common. And I've experienced that in my life many times in my early career. And in my late career too, occasionally. not in job interviews, but just people who don't know how to interact with others, right? So, yeah. Now, once again, you're making a first impression. So this is why we need to swallow our frustration and, maintain professionalism, maintain manners, be polite, be cheery, keep the body language positive and professional, right? Because you're here to win. You're here to get the job. You can keep it real. I get it. Trust me, I get it. But then you don't get the job. Now, sometimes there's a good job that lies behind a bad gatekeeper, a bad interviewer. Usually if you're dealing with people in the HR department and they're idiots, which some of them are, you never see those people again once you get the job, really. You're dealing with other people that are actually pretty decent, right? They pay you well and you get along with them great. It would be such a shame to give that up because you couldn't act professionally to an idiot interviewer that you encountered on your first interview. So that's why I'm saying what I'm saying. And all I want to say to wrap this up is, if you know this, if you can expect and anticipate possibly this kind of treatment when you go to a job interview, it helps you deal with it. You know what I'm saying? If you're expecting, okay, there's a chance they could be a little rude, they might not understand manners or protocol, or, you know, they might ask dumb questions because I'm interviewing with a recruiter, not a hiring manager. A recruiter works in the HR department. They don't know anything about being a mechanic. I'm a mechanic. They're going to ask me questions about my qualifications as a mechanic. They might not really understand what any of those are. So I get it. I may have to deal with that. But knowing this will help you prepare yourself so that you can perform well in the interview and not communicate anything negative. Because if you do, if you get frustrated or you're pessimistic or you're offended or anything, what they will perceive you as someone who is not a team player, who could rock the boat, who is not a good fit. You might have anger issues, and you might have poor interpersonal skills. Right? And we're here to win. We're here to get the job. Okay? At least we're here to get an offer. Right? Now, you can always throw it back in their face later if you really don't want it and there's something bad about it. But since you're here and you've done all the work, let's get the job. Okay, over to you guys. I see there's a couple of people in the chat. For everyone else, all 34 of you that are here, thank you for being here. I'm here to answer your questions. So if you have questions, if you're wondering something, get in the chat. Michelle is here. Michelle says, good morning. Good morning, Michelle. Thank you for being here. You're awesome. Now, how do you say this? Sardini? I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. I apologize. I say everybody's name wrong. I insist upon it. Sardini says, I'm a new manager and even thought my workplace is lax. There is still a professional notion that we have to uphold. What are some tips to appear or be professional? Okay, here is the number one thing to be professional, okay? In the sort of number one commandment, as it were. Be super friendly, super polite, and upbeat at all times with all your employees and with all interactions in the workplace. This can be one hell of a challenge, okay? I'm the first person to admit that. But that is the number one thing to do. If you don't do this, if you do the opposite of this, if you lose your temper, if you raise your voice and give one of your subordinates a dressing down, or you're verbally abusive, or your body language is very aggressive, maybe you're almost intimidating. You can be much more intimidating to subordinates than you realize, okay? That's another lesson, okay? If you do any of these bad things, it creates all kinds of problems. It does all kinds of harm. It can sour relationships. It can terminate working relationships. It makes people want to leave. It makes people not want to deal with you. And once that happens, it's going to be very hard to be a good manager. If your employees don't want to deal with you, they don't like you, they don't want to discuss anything with you, they want to minimize their interactions with you, it's going to be very hard to be a successful manager under those circumstances. So that's the number one thing that you have to do. Okay? You have to be like this is kind of the foundation of developing social skills and interpersonal skills. The reality is that the way humans behave is that we are attracted to positive people that make us feel good about ourselves. We want more of that. We want to deal with people that are pleasant to deal with, that give us a good experience when we interact with them. We tend to avoid people that don't do that, that get upset easily, that might berate us or insult us, or we feel there's a possibility they could do this. It's likely they may do that because they've done it in the past, right? We avoid people like that. We try to distance ourselves from them. We try to not communicate with those people. And in order to be a manager, you need to do a lot of two-way communication. You need to get a lot of information, and you need to give a lot of information, usually in the form of instructions or informing people. And you need to know what's going on. You need to get information to come to you, including a lot of bad news. And if people are afraid to give you bad news, you're not going to get an accurate picture of what's happening. And usually that makes it impossible to do a good job. Okay, so this is the very beginning of, developing your interpersonal skills, is realizing that, okay? If you're the type of person that everyone loves, everybody wants to work with, everyone thinks is fantastic, and they like the way they feel when you're around, they feel good about themselves, they feel like what they do matters, they feel like they're appreciated, they will stay, even though they could make more money in another job, they will stay working for you, they will support you, they will help you, and they will have a personal loyalty to you in some measure. Okay? That's what you need to cultivate. Trust me, it's going to be hard, because when bad things happen, it's hard to keep your cool. It's hard to stay positive. You can feel what you want, but it's what you show to others that really matters. Okay? But that's a great question, Sardini. If a lot more people realized this sooner, their careers would take off sooner. Azam says, hello. Hello, Azam. And you got the little 5 fingers there. Deanne, 4300, says, I often have recruiters contact me and I have a very hard time understanding their accent. What should I do or not do? Yes, that can be a challenge. A language barrier can be a challenge. It can go every which way depending on what country you're in and who you're interacting with. And even within countries, there's many different dialects. It's sometimes hard. And the problem is that a lot of people who talk on the phone, talking to many different people, making one call after another, saying the same thing in large part. It's almost like people that work at the drive-thru, would you like fries with that? They say it 1,000 times every day, so they tend to not say it in an intelligible way. They put the accent on different syllables, and the inflection is different. They go, "You want fries with that?" And it's like you're expected to understand that, and especially if their accent is different, it can make it almost impossible. What I would do if it were me is I just recommend that you draw attention to that, not in a rude way, not in a negative way that makes people feel bad, but just say, I'm sorry, it's a very bad line. Could I get you to speak up a little bit? Maybe speak a little bit slower. It's a lot of interference, something like that. And hopefully that'll solve the problem without making the person feel self-conscious or feel insulted or something. That's what I would do. But not addressing it and then not being able to understand anything they say, that's not really the path to success in my opinion. Bob says, I ask that person to speak slower. Yes, exactly. I agree with you, Bob. Okay, Sardini, what are some ways you organize your day? I work in operations logistics and I'm work on my organizing skills. One tip I've received is time blocking. Love to know more tips. Absorb into my regimen. Okay, so I came up through operations. So thinking back to like 20 years ago when I was working in operations, what I used to do is I would try and load balance my day as much as possible. So what I encountered, I was working in a situation where I was managing like 25 employees, and it was a 24/7 shift kind of situation, and you get you go into work and you're responsible for an 8-hour chunk of the day, so you'd be there over an hour early, you'd stay a little bit late, and during that 8 hours, you'd be in charge. And you had about 140 tasks to do during the course of those 8 hours. Now, some things you can't do early. You have to wait till later when you get information or when something occurs. But other things you could do at any time during your 8-hour shift, right? And what I observed a lot of other, what my peers would do was they would deal with things as necessary. So what that meant was they would spend the first couple of hours of their day doing almost nothing, lounging around because, they've given out instructions for people. Now you're waiting for information to come back. How's it going? What's going on? What do I need to deal with? And so they would do practically nothing for the first 2 hours or so. They'd laze around. And then they would be so busy after that, they'd be running around like chickens with their heads cut off. They would just be like all in a panic. And it would all bottleneck to the end of their day where they'd have to hand over things to the next shift coming in. They'd be trying to explain the situation to the next shift in a context of total chaos, like everything was going down right now, everything was happening right now. And it was just unworkable. So what I learned early on was you have to try and load balance. So everything that you possibly could do that wasn't super time sensitive, I would do early in the shift. I would work at a constant rate. I would try to work at a constant rate throughout the entire shift. And that would usually involve leaving unscheduled, unstructured time where you don't have things planned, because the odds are that you're going to be dealing with developments and things coming up, right? So I would do that as much as possible. You need to be in the job for a little bit to be able to plan that properly. I would also go off checklists. That was my way of doing things. I noticed a lot of people trying to do 140 things every day, and they would forget some of them. That was a typical thing, and it was very frustrating and it was unprofessional. And so what I did is I just systematized everything with checklists and stuff. Maybe a bit overboard for some people, but that's how I did it. And I feel that I got really good results with that. For example, you wouldn't forget to submit timesheets for your subordinates or something, some administrative thing like that, because it was on the checklist. No matter what went down during your day, you'd be able to handle it. So that might be a starting point for you. Just try to load balance, try to always work at a steady rate as much as possible, rather than doing nothing and then being totally overwhelmed and going back to nothing again. But intelligent question. Crypto LFG says, got an interview coming up in 30 minutes. Any advice or tips? Well, I've done some videos which are 2-minute videos that are it's like a cram video for all the questions. But the most important thing you can do is remember that the interview is about soft skills, really. That's really what it's about. Once they've picked your resume and called you in, it's about what you're like as a person. So go in there and be the person that everyone would want to work with. Be friendly, be upbeat, try and, just put on a good nature. Don't take anything, don't appear insulted. Don't appear disgruntled. Don't appear frustrated with them. Have good body language. And another thing that they're wanting is they're wanting to see genuine desire for the particular job that they're interviewing you for. You want that job, okay? I even recommend that people say this. I did this. I put this in a video a long time ago. I did this in a high-profile job where I was flown to another city and I was talking to the CEO of a company, and and I was not the most qualified candidate. And so I said, look, I want to tell you something, and I want you to listen. Are you listening? And they said, yes. And I said, listen, I want this job. Okay. This would give me the opportunity to do this. It allows me to bring I can't remember exactly what I said, but something to do with, it allows me to bring all my skills, into one position. I've got lots of diverse skills. This job allows me to tap all of those because they're all necessary, and it's a tremendous opportunity for me. So I want this job, and I got it. And I've always felt that was the thing that really pushed it over the edge. I was not the obvious candidate. I was probably one of the least obvious candidates. with the least experience. So, that's something you can say that has a big impact. Show genuine desire and enthusiasm for the job. Even if this is like a job that you applied for, you might have forgotten you applied for. That does happen. If that happens, it's happened to you. Don't feel bad about it. And then somebody calls you for it and you're like, what was this job? I don't remember applying. And you have to go back and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I guess I applied for that. And then they want to interview you, right? Even if it's that type of job, don't go in there going, it's kind of a throwaway thing. No, act like you have genuine desire for it, no matter what it is. Not just the desire for a job, but the desire for this specific job. You want this one. That goes a long way. That's kind of gold to a lot of interviewers. Bob Masavo says, smile. It comes across even over the phone. Yes, I did a video on phone interviews where I said precisely that, Okay, so Sardini is talking to Crypto. Crypto is talking back and forth. Good luck. Yes. This is ginger ale, by the way. I was doing an earlier live stream called Side Hustle Ideas, where we talk about entrepreneurship. I had a different drink. It looked like this, except it was more yellow. That was Red Bull. This is ginger ale. So yeah. But no, very important stuff. I mean, it's an appropriate question saying, I've got an interview in 30 minutes. What's your final advice? My final advice would be the topic of today's live stream, coincidentally, because it's that important. You could be the most qualified person in the world. You could, have all the credentials, all the experience. You could have a PhD. It doesn't matter. They're still going to reject you if you don't care about doing this job. They think you're going to leave soon. Or you go in there and you're absolutely insufferable. You convey that, working with this person would be a nightmare. They have a bad temper. They're too cool to talk to you all the time. They're arrogant. They're rude. They're condescending. Doesn't matter how smart they are, how accomplished they are. I'm not working with that. That's going to make my life a living hell. That's what the hiring manager is thinking, and that's what recruiters are trained to look for. Okay? Sardini, ginger ale gang, add a little vodka rum. Yeah, you'd get really interesting advice if I did that. Brandon says, how would you describe the interview process for a chief of staff position? Okay, well, are you talking about like in the military, or are you talking about a second in command, like for, just a regular civilian job? Listen, look, I've never been a chief of staff, so I can't speak from that perspective, but think of what the chief of staff role does, okay? My understanding is like in a chief of staff, it's someone that has a lot of knowledge, but they can also kind of obfuscate a lot of the details and trivia and not have that reach the boss, right? Usually there's like a manager or someone in charge. If it's the military, it's very simple. You have like some high-ranking officer or something, and then you've got a chief of staff, and the chief of staff deals with the staff. They deal with all the administration and all the little niggling details, and they filter information both ways. So they make sure that all the little trivia is not something that filters, that percolates up, and that the high-ranking officer has to deal with, the boss has to deal with. They take care of all that themselves. And then they also, the instructions of the high-ranking officer, it goes to the chief of staff, and then they interpret it and, refine it and tailor it and spread it out to all the staff, right? So I imagine in almost any context, the chief of staff is going to have to understand a lot of protocol. They're going to have very advanced communication skills in the sense that they know what what information is appropriate to communicate both, whichever way, how to filter, how to elaborate, how to interpret, and have that all done correctly. Okay. And then obviously a lot of technical skills in key areas. So I imagine that would be a chief of staff role. So the interview process, what they're going to be doing is, I would imagine, now this is all guesswork on my part, okay, because I haven't actually interviewed anyone for a chief of staff position, but because we're looking for those things that I mentioned, I would imagine they're going to be asking you a lot of behavioral questions. Or hypothetical questions. They're going to say, how would you do this? If the boss or the general or someone gives you this instruction, how would you go about in implementing it? What would you do with that? Or if one of your subordinates in this area has communicated this to you, how would you handle it? Would you mention it to the general? If you do, what would you say? How would you do it? This kind of thing. They're going to give you a lot of questions like that to do with how would you do things and what would you say, and that will tell them if you know what you're doing or not. Okay. If you had a hiring manager in the room that knows, maybe it's the general, maybe it's the high ranking officer, or it's the big boss. They would know, like, okay, that's a good answer or that's not a good answer, at least not for me. And they would be able to tell from that whether, you're the one that they would want to select. Not the best candidate, but just the one that's the most appropriate for them, for what they're looking for. That's what I imagine the interview process would be. And it would not be one round. I imagine it would be a couple of different rounds of interviews with different people. Okay, first interview with a recruiter, more like a screening interview, more like verifying basic stuff, like you actually want to do this job and things like this. You're not going to jump ship. You don't consider it beneath you. Things like that, just to check for the general things. And then a second interview, certainly, maybe more than one, with a hiring manager, where they go into much more of the like the shop talk, the nitty gritty of specific situations. What would you do? How would you do it? And they're going to form their opinion based on that. And that's going to be all important. Bob says, I love ginger ale as long as it's not made with corn syrup. Do they put that in ginger ale? I'm sure they probably do. Right next to the monosodium glutamate, something like that. But I like it because this is the only soft drink, at least that I am familiar with, that I like, that doesn't have caffeine in it. It doesn't have sugar in it, but I still like the taste. There's a lot of drinks like that, no caffeine, no sugar, but they're like soft drinks. There's a lot of those, but I don't really like them. So that's why I'm drinking ginger ale. Sardinay says, will you be doing more of these live streams? Yes, I do these every week. I do a couple of different live streams. This one is called How to Get Hired, where we talk about job interviews, getting hired, right? I do this every Monday, right around this time. I do another one called Side Hustle Ideas, where we talk about entrepreneurship, doing side hustles, starting a business, running a business, that kind of thing. That's Monday mornings, at least where I am in North America. And in the past, I've alternated that between a side hustle called leadership, where I talk about, I draw from my experiences as a CEO and as an executive and how to lead a company if you're in sort of middle to senior management. So those are the three I've done as a recurring thing. But yeah, it's great having you here. Thank you to the 38 people that are tuned in right now. You guys are awesome. And incidentally, if you feel that you're doing a job search and it's really not going your way, it's taking a very long time and you're not making much headway, apart from my videos, which, in videos you can talk about little 5-minute topics. But if you're trying to take on a bigger challenge where you need to know more than 5 minutes worth of stuff, maybe you're trying to get into the hidden job market. You're trying to get into the world of networking. Most people get hired through networking. If you don't believe me on this, that's fine. Go do your own research. You'll see that this is true. But, maybe you're an introvert, maybe you're a technical person, you don't have a big network of people and you don't know how to do that stuff or how to go about it. Like that's a bigger challenge. I can't teach that in 5 minutes. I can't even teach that in 2 hours. There's a lot of principles there. So for that reason, I put a lot of that stuff into this course right here, my Get Hired course, where it talks about everything. So it talks about networking and gives you all of that, all laid out, how to do it. It gives you all the interview stuff, the resume stuff, all that kind of thing. So if you want all of my recommendations essentially in one place, from beginning to end, in a logical manner, with templates and stuff like this, check out that course. There's a link in the description. I've done a video that explains it, so it's as transparent as possible, what happens in the course and what you get and, how it works. So check those out. There's links in the description. If that's something that, appeals to you, if you're the type of person that learns that way. Brandon says, not military. Okay, well, same thing applies. Like, I have never worked in a business where they actually had a position called chief of staff. I don't know if is that more of an American thing? I'm not sure. Like, it's just not a title that I see, that I've really seen a lot in my career. I've seen it in movies when they're in the military. But it usually, it's more like the assistant manager role. Like, that's what I'm used to it being called. I'm not sure if the title assistant manager is usually an analog of chief of staff. But that's kind of, what I was going for. The other thing is that if you're an assistant manager, if that's what this role is, it means that you are also able to substitute for the manager, right? So you would have the capabilities of your boss. Maybe you don't have as much experience, but you have the same capabilities and abilities of your boss. Okay? So if that's a requirement of the role, you would also have to demonstrate, presumably in the interviews, that you have a desire to do the manager role to a degree. You are capable of doing it. You can handle it. You're not put off by the fact that the manager went on vacation and now you have to run things for a couple of weeks, So that would be a necessary component that they may check for, right? And in order to do that, you would not only have the if you see what I'm saying, you would not only have the technical skills to do the job, but you would also have the personal skills, the interpersonal skills and communication skills to do the job. You may have to assume duties where you go and represent the organization to, outside parties, contractors, suppliers, institutional customers, things like this. And you would have to be able to perform those duties. You would have to understand the protocol. You'd have to understand how to present yourself. Like we talked about earlier in this live stream, knowing how to project yourself in a very positive way, how to have a lot of personal charisma and have people like you and want to work with you, just like the manager would presumably have all those traits, right? You would have to have them too if you're expected to cover for them. Okay. And then finally, if it's like an assistant manager type thing, it's in that sense, you're a chief of staff. What we usually find, especially when dealing with individuals, is that people tend to hire in their own image. So, for example, if the manager is a technical introvert, they would see more value in a candidate for assistant manager that is a technical introvert. You know what I'm saying? This is the opposite to what theoretically would be the right choice. You would want to get someone who can round out your skills and have strengths where you might have a deficiency. But that's not what we see in practice. We see people that hire in their own image. So if you are an extroverted salesperson who's a sports fan, you tend to hire as your number two or your number one. You tend to hire an extroverted, sports fan, right? Just like yourself. And then you get along like this. You get along really well. right? So having a rapport with the hiring manager, the person who's going to be your boss, that's very important. It's almost like if you're an executive, you're hiring an executive assistant. They have to have a rapport with you. If you just don't click at all, it's just not going to work because you're going to be working very closely together. Okay. Sardini, hell yeah, I'm excited to watch Monday mornings. Got to click that bell. Well, thank you. Yeah. And whatever you're dealing with, let me know. These are entirely Q&As, really. I talk about a topic just to get things started, but they're really a Q&A. Can you give an example of networking for jobs that are not tech meetups? Oh, of course. I've done this many times. So if you're talking about tech, a little flag goes off in my head where I think introvert. Technical people are usually introverts. I have a degree in engineering. I know all about technical people. I know all about introverts. I feel for them. I empathize with them, but they have a huge blind spot sometimes, and that can be the social interaction, giving a negative first impression, coming across as aloof, arrogant, antisocial, easily provoked, right? They don't have a way with people, right? That can be a tremendous disadvantage to these people, especially when they get into management positions. Rule number one, if you're networking, unless you absolutely need to, don't talk to people in the operations department. Don't talk to the COO. Of all the C-level people, the COO will be the hardest to deal with because they're usually some type of engineer or technician. Usually. Not always, but usually. And that means they know a hell of a lot about the technicalities of what they do, but they may not be the most friendly, warm, kind of approachable type people. So give an example of networking. Well, listen, what I always advocate, the simplest thing that I maintain that job seekers can do, if you choose to do this, is use the internet to do something I would call networking on demand. And what that is where you, first of all, use the internet because you have it at your fingertips to first of all discover what employers around you could possibly hire you. So you can use Google Maps for that. And then you use tools like LinkedIn to see inside of those organizations that you found, right? So let's say you're an engineer. Something you might want to know is what companies within within commuting distance, say, of where I live, would hire someone that has my abilities. Like they hire engineers, or they hire people with engineering degrees, or they hire, my skill set. So you can discover those with Google Maps, and then you could use LinkedIn to see inside all of those organizations to the individuals. Here's who they are. You can even essentially see their resume, which is what their profile is, and then you can reach out to them using the same tool, LinkedIn. I'm not talking about recruiters. I'm not talking about HR people. I'm talking about the engineers that work there. Like, for example, if you are an engineer and you would work in an engineering department and you would work for an engineering manager, reach out to the engineering managers of the companies around you that hire engineers, right? And the simplest possible interaction you could have is to say, hello, my name is X, and, I am an engineer. I do this particular thing really well. Now, if ever you're looking for an engineer to join your team, please let me know, because I would love to work for you. Have a great day. People are not going to bite your head off for sending them a message like that. And if they do, they've got problems. Like, that's really not what we see. Most people, they either don't respond if they just don't happen to be hiring anyone right now. But if you contact enough people the odds are is that someone is hiring someone with your skills right now who's within commuting distance of you where you live, right? So this is the simplest possible thing you can do. You don't have to leave your desktop computer. You don't have to leave your phone to do this. And you can do it in like 15 minutes, right? This is an example of the stuff I cover in that course, by the way, if you're looking for this. Now, for those of you who just want like a sort of overview, in the comments of this live stream, the comment box, there's a bunch of links, and I put some resources in there. And one of them is a link to a video I did that describes this exact thing called, what's it called? It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. So follow that link and watch the video, because I take you through like a screen grab of me actually doing this. And you can see an example of what that would look like, okay? There's a hell of a lot more to this than just that. That's the tip of the iceberg. I talk about more of it in my Get Hired course. It's essentially the skills that people learn when they become executives, or to become executives. Because when you're operating at higher levels of companies, it's all about interacting with people, most of them outside the company, right? You're constantly talking to suppliers, vendors, customers, regulators, partners, competitors, all the people that play in that industry, right? There might be opportunities, there might be, pitfalls to avoid, right? So this is what you're doing. Now, you have to develop those skills, and you have to be able to reach out to companies, right? And know how to do it, and know what the protocol is to do it professionally, and actually get a response where somebody takes you seriously. This is kind of like just a tiny subset of this that job seekers can do, where you present yourself very professionally to the right people. Okay? Anyway, I could go on for hours. It's a huge topic. That's why I put it in a course. Okay, it's not the only thing the course is about, but it covers it. Anyway, hopefully that makes sense. Check out that video called How Successful People Get Jobs if you're interested in pursuing that. Now, if you're more extroverted, you can do this, but you can also go to job fairs and industry events and things like this. That might be more your cup of tea. You might enjoy that process more, right? There's other kind of halfway houses, like doing informational interviews. You contact an executive from a company that has potential to hire you, and you just do an informational interview. Say, hey, I love what you guys do. I'd love to get your expert opinion on this industry or something. Would you be able to spare me 30 minutes of your valuable time? I'd just love to be able to ask you a few questions. I'm trying to learn all I can about it. And a lot of people will say yes for a variety of reasons, but including ego. It's very flattering when someone contacts you and say, dude, teach me. I would love to know what you know. What's the female version of dude? I think it's dude, right? Like if you're a girl, and what do people call, do they call you dude? I don't think they call you dudette. If someone calls you dudette, leave. Or just say no. Just no. And then walk away. That's my professional advice. You have to be a CEO to understand these things. Okay. What? California? Okay. What if I had to take time from work for family care and have to explain it? Any tips? What I can say on my updated resume? I've been out of work since 2017 and want to go back to work. Okay, so basically what you're describing is you have a work gap, okay? This is relatively common. This is not unique to you. You might have had to deal with some personal stuff, some family stuff. Maybe you've got a sick family member needs care. Hey, it happens, and it's a lot more common than people think. But basically, you have a work gap. What that means is that you haven't been employed since 2017. Now, here's the problem. If you go to a recruiter, okay, the way recruiters are trained to think, doesn't mean they always think this way, but the way they're trained to think is they don't like work gaps, especially ones that are like a year or more. Because the reasoning behind it is that, in theory, if you have been working, it might be because people don't want to hire you. And if people don't want to hire you, there might be something wrong with you that they don't know, they can't get details on. And so you become a higher risk candidate because you have a work gap. Recruiters are trained to not to get the best candidate, not to pick the best candidate. They're trained to pick the lowest risk candidate. That's what they're paid for. That's what they're trained to do. So this is a problem for them. A work gap is seen as something that makes you more risky. They also think things that sometimes really don't apply, like if you don't use it, you lose it, right? I've heard this stuff. I've heard people say that to me. Just because you haven't used a knowledge from a degree in 2 years doesn't mean that you've lost it all. It's ridiculous. But the way they think is they think in terms of risk. And they say on occasion, they have said some really idiotic things like this. So the way you get around this is you don't get a job by talking to a recruiter. You talk to hiring managers. Hiring manager is a fancy way of saying the boss, right? The boss and the recruiter are two different people. If you're a mechanic and you work at a garage, if you talk to the hiring manager, that means you're probably talking to the person who runs the garage, and they're probably a mechanic. So if you want to talk mechanics with them about fixing cars or whatever, they'll talk your ear off all day long. They know it all. You would have something to talk about. But if you're talking to a recruiter, the recruiter doesn't know anything about fixing cars. The recruiter works in the HR department. They understand things like labor laws, right? That kind of stuff. So they know nothing about fixing cars. So you can get a job by talking to a recruiter. That's how you get a lot of lower level jobs. Starting in mid-management and going up, usually you don't talk to recruiters, you talk to hiring managers. For executive jobs, you almost exclusively talk to like what you would call the hiring manager, the other executives or the CEO or board members, people that run the show. They're not HR people. They don't understand labor laws, per se. But most people get jobs by not talking to recruiters, but by going around recruiters to hiring managers, right? If you don't believe me on this, think of like a construction site. You have, they're building a house, down the street, and there's a foreman, and they're using, for casual labor, for like unskilled labor, they're using, teenagers, people, it's their first job, casual labor. Now, if you show up there in the morning and say, hey, I'm ready to work, I'm ready to go, I can lift a lot of heavy things, I can carry whatever you need, whatever, I'm ready to go, can I work for you? A lot of hiring managers, the boss, the foreman will say, sure, yeah. Just give your details to that person, they'll take care of the administrative crap. Okay, we're starting at 8, so that's in 2 minutes, so get ready. Right? They don't care if you've got a work gap, right? You're there, you're ready to work, you're passionate, and you showed up. That's enough. That's a trivial example. That's like a very low-level example. But the way you overcome a work gap, it's the same way like when you change careers. You don't talk to a recruiter. The first question out of a recruiter's mouth is going to be, how many years experience do you have doing this job? Now think about it. If you're changing careers, the answer will be 0. I've never done this before. I'm changing careers. I'm moving from something completely different to this. I've never done this before. So a recruiter will then say, well, then how do you think you could possibly be qualified for this? No, sorry. Fail, right? But if you talk to a hiring manager, they see passion. They see the fact that you've shown that you're dedicated enough by showing up. That signals that you are serious about this. They're getting a free sample of how professional you are, what you're like as a person. And sometimes all that is enough. They've got proof of passion. They've got a free sample of your interpersonal skills, your professionalism. And if what you say, like, what you've done in your previous job, they're kind of transportable skills. Like you dealt with customers, you dealt with, numbers, you're in a position of responsibility, like stuff like it's transportable. Sometimes that's enough. And that's how you get back into the workforce after being out of work since 2017, is you talk to a hiring manager, you show that you're professional, show that you're easy to deal with, you have a desire for the job, you're signaling that by showing up, you explain, I had to take care of a sick family member or whatever it was, I've been out of work, but I've been really wanting to do this, and that's the tiebreaker. That's how you can get back. It's a lot easier to go that route than to go through recruiters, sending out job applications and all this kind of stuff. Okay, I got some questions building up. I got to get to it. So Crazy Matsuki says, what are your comments on companies that use Test Gorilla to test applicants? I don't know what that is. I don't care what that is. There's all kinds of automated tests. First of all, what it signals is that it's not a very important job. It also signals that they are not confident in their own abilities to assess you. And already that tells me two negative things about that company. If you have qualifications, in theory, you shouldn't need to be tested. You know what I'm saying? They're using it as a form of screening, right? Now, I can't really speak to Test Gorilla because I've never used it. I don't really know anything about it. But, these are like flavor of the month kind of things. They come out all the time. There's always new ones. And, they use these types of tools when they're dealing with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applicants because they don't have time to even have a phone call with them, right? And usually they consist of, pass-fail questions like, fill in your salary expectations. And if it's above a certain number, it just rejects you outright. Things like this. Okay, Ricardo has an interesting conversation about cannons going on, which I don't really understand. Okay, Brandon says, does the MBA course go over how to present yourself in a positive way? Well, you don't need an MBA for that. I mean, that's not something that's taught as part of an MBA. It really isn't. They talk about much more advanced stuff than that. That's like basic interpersonal skills and presentation skills. You don't need that's not usually in an MBA curriculum. You can learn that stuff from YouTube videos and by practice. That's really what you need, is practice. It's like saying, will this course teach me how to play piano? Well, no. How do you play piano well is by practice. You can get any book for cheap and then, learn the music and then just practice it over and over and over again. You use YouTube videos to give you little pointers about the technique, but then 99% of the work is done through practice. So the other thing is how to present yourself in a positive way. There's not enough material on that topic to fill a course. It's actually, there's not much to it. You could learn it in, I'd say 2 hours. You could learn all the theory there is to know, really, of how to do that. And then you could go out and, as long as you practice it and you develop your skill, you can go out and present yourself positively. It's not like shooting for the moon. So no, that I don't think per se that's really in an MBA program. So it's not in the course. You don't need a course to teach you that. My thing moved. My feed moved. I gotta keep pace with this, or else it just jumps all over the place. Where we are. Okay. But it's not a stupid question, Brandon. That's a very smart question. But this is good news. You don't need a course to teach you that. It's all for free. It's a few very simple principles. If this is a goal of yours and you're trying to do it, I would watch a few. Honestly, I'd watch a few YouTube videos, read a few articles on the internet about how to present. Dale Carnegie wrote one of the first really, really good books on that. And I have it, and I've talked about it. I can't remember the exact title. It's like how to, I can't remember the title. You know what? Let's Google this really quickly. If you guys can bear with me for like just a few seconds here. I'll be able to tell you a really good resource to be able to do this. I'm just going to try and do a screen share here. Okay, right. So Dale Carnegie. Okay, book presenting, something like that. Now there's his original books, and then The Quick and Easy Way to Effective Speaking. That's something I've talked about before. I think I've done a book summary, like a video maybe that talks about that. But this is his really famous one, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So I mean, that's always a good read just in general to be more successful in your career and more successful in your life, really. This has stood the test of time. It was written in the 1930s, and it's never been out of print. I mean, that tells you something. It sold millions and millions, which is a lot for a business book. But this is the one that specifically talks about how to present, how to speak, how to captivate an audience, how to make people like you, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so you could do a lot worse than starting with that. Just order it for like $5 off Amazon or something, and then just read it. And he gives a lot of theory, and he gives a lot of great examples of how to do what to do in different situations. He gives examples of like speeches to a big audience. He gives examples of like interactions one-on-one, for different reasons. I mean, I have no personal interest in recommending this. It's just a really good book. Sardini says, off-topic side note, my company is hiring that's Department of Transportation in the States, I think, right? Hazmat truck drivers, spectrum paint. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Chandler, guys, I got my job a few months back. A big tip I can give is focus your applications on jobs that have been posted. Okay, sure. We've got people giving advice out in the chat here. I don't agree necessarily with what Chandler is saying here. Turn on notifications for daily job posts on LinkedIn for your job filters. Yeah, you could go that route, but there's much more effective ways that you could get a job than doing that. I can tell you that right now. California says, I do a lot of work history, though, and was the reason. Okay. People are talking amongst themselves. How do you find a recruiting manager in person, a place of business? Why would you want to do that? Hiring manager is not the same thing as recruiting manager, if anyone's wondering. Hiring manager is, like I said, it's a fancy name for the word boss. The boss is usually a manager. So if you're working in a garage, you're a fully competent mechanic. You want to get a job as a mechanic. The person who's probably going to want to hire a mechanic is the supervisor in a garage. They are a mechanic themselves, or they're the manager, the general manager. They own the garage or they run the garage, and maybe they're a fully qualified mechanic. And the mechanics report to them, right? Maybe in a smaller garage. So they are the boss. They don't work in the HR department. They manage the mechanics. So they're the first ones to say, I need to hire a new mechanic. I've got this workload. I've got this many people. I manage the schedule, and it just doesn't work. I have to keep paying people tons of overtime. We need another mechanic full-time. So they initiate the job, right? Then what they do is they can sometimes hire a recruiter. They can sort of delegate that to a recruiter, say, go post a job. Here's the requirements. Here's the title. Here's kind of what I'm thinking is the person we need. Go write this up. Go post it. Go get some candidates. Filter them. Like, do a one round of filter. Make sure that they're, serious. And then call me when you have, say, 6 candidates that meet all these qualifications. And then set up the interviews. Make sure that I can make them. I will attend them. And we'll go from there. So it's the hiring manager, the boss, who owns the process. The recruiter is just, for want of a better word, a grunt that does an administrative task. Okay, they create these documents like the job posting based on information they're given. They publicize it. They receive the responses. They filter the responses. They do a screening interview, and they set up job interviews. Right? Sometimes they conduct them themselves. Sometimes they set them up, but it's mainly the boss that's going to be at the job interviews running the show. Okay, so the boss is the person you really want to talk to. That's also the way you tap hidden jobs. The boss wants to hire a mechanic. Why do I need to post this in the paper? I know like 20 people that would love to work here, And that's what's called the hidden job market. The job exists, they're hiring, but they just don't have a need to post it publicly because it's a highly desirable job and there's a lot of people that want it. So the odds are is that somebody in the company, all these mechanics, they have a brother or a cousin or a friend that's a fully qualified mechanic that they can vouch for and say, this person isn't a criminal, they aren't crazy, they're dedicated, they're highly talented, and I stake my reputation with you in saying this. You should bring them in for an interview if you're looking for another mechanic. And the boss will say, okay, I'll give them a chance. I'm not hiring them because you tell me to, but I'll give them a chance. If they deserve it, if they cut the mustard, sure. Right? So the person you want to talk to in pretty much almost all situations is the boss. You only talk to recruiters if you have no other choice. And for low-level jobs that that has hundreds of applicants, that's where they pawn it off onto recruiters. Okay, where was I here keeping up with this? Okay, Matsuki says, Test Girl is a kind of test that asks absurd, non-related questions to what you are applying. They have digital marketing kind of questions, but all non-related to what you... Yeah, see, this is another problem. Well, it may not be a problem. I don't like it. It's where in the last 20 years, there's been a lot of psychology that has come into HR. And I mean, I'm not opposed to psychology. I'm not opposed to psychology or sociology. They're perfectly valid areas, but I've seen some of the results of it. And a lot of the psychometrics, some of them make sense. Some of them really don't. And what you're describing here about Test Gorilla, that leads me to get the impression it's one of these kind of more modern, new age kind of psychometrics and things where they ask you completely off the wall questions and it's supposed to reveal something about if you're a good employee or not. Like, they don't give this stuff to executives. There's a reason for that. That's all I'll say. Okay, how to win friends and influence people. Yes, I talked about that. That's what I mean. Okay. Here we go. Carmiego says, Bill, my manager and colleague have quit. 2 positions will become available. How does management decide how many positions to open now? Team with 2 people. Is it likely that they open the position? I can't answer that for you. That depends on the situation. If you're going to say, if you're asking, what's the decision process that goes on in their head where they decide to hire 2 new people? There can be like a million answers to that. Making some assumptions, assuming that this is like a private company we're talking about, they care about making money, right? That's actually an initiative of theirs. It's not always the case. And they are in, they have their heads screwed on properly. They're intelligent. Usually what they do is they look at the budget. Okay. If it's a department, and it depends if it's a cost center or a profit center, but they'll have a budget and they'll look at the workload and they'll evaluate the workload. Do we really need all these people doing all this? Right? And if the answer is yes, and then you compare that to the amount of human resources you have, the people that are charged with doing that work, and they find that, there's according to their reasoning, these people can't do all that work, then they decide to hire more. It's just that simple. It's not an automatic thing where, like, if somebody leaves, they have to replace them. It doesn't necessarily work like that. Some companies that are very slow moving, very traditional, in certain industries that are very slow moving and very traditional, they may think like that. A lot of other industries don't think like that at all. It can be very fast moving. And usually when someone retires, that's a time to reevaluate, do you need this many people? If you want to reduce your headcount, it's a perfect time to say, I think we're okay with less people in this area. You don't even have to fire anyone. You had someone leave, they retired or whatever. Great. No pain, and we can downsize, which is what we wanted to do in that department. So there's all kinds of things going on there. It's not possible to really answer specifically. Knowing whether to wait a few months or accept an offer from the job market. What? Oh, okay, this is a continuation. Team of two. Is it likely that they open the position? Knowing whether to wait a few months or accept an offer from the job market. I like to stay, but also want to pay jump of moving or promotion internally. Sorry, I'm having a hard time understanding exactly what you mean, Carmiego. Is this a continuation of the last thing you said? It sounds like something completely new. You're deciding whether to stay to see if they'll promote you. Is that, I think, what you're asking? Look, as I kind of said, the reason why people hire is all over the map. Like, it could be for a variety of different reasons, and how they think with regard to replacing people, like in a succession plan, or whether you hire a subordinate to promote them into a manager role, or you hire externally to replace that manager. Like, there's a lot of factors. For example, one, like the sort of modern school of thought is that if things are going well and, the status quo is just fine, then hiring an internal candidate is preferable because they're a known quantity. They've been with the company for a while. You know exactly what you're getting with that person. They've proven themselves, so they're less risky. However, if you don't want status quo, if the company is, struggling and you need to make changes, in that case, they prefer hiring an external candidate. They won't promote somebody up into a management role. They'll replace the manager with an external candidate that's already a manager. And the reasoning is that, in theory, they will bring new ideas. They've seen different ways of doing things, maybe in a more successful company. And so they'll transport some of those methods and skills to this company. That's the thinking. So, it's very hard to predict how people think about, promotions and things because there's so many factors. It really is down to just the perceptions and mentality of the people making the decisions, and they're all over the map. So listen, my advice is always for you to look out for yourself. And I'm not telling you to do one thing or another, but what I would say is don't put your faith in promises of what might occur if you have to forego something that's an opportunity now. Okay? That's what I would say. So if you could leave and get a better job somewhere else now, my thinking is I would take that while you have the opportunity rather than forego that and stay in the hope that someone will promote you in the near future. That's like, unless they can give you some kind of reassurance or something tangible, and it would have to be pretty convincing. I would always do the thing that's right for you now, because first of all, a lot of people have been burned on promises from employers, and employers, I'm speaking from experience, employers they want to keep their options open. They don't want talented employees to leave. So they'll say whatever they say that, whatever they need to say that's non-committal to make you stay or make you want to stay. That's part of their role. They don't want to drive their talent away. They want to try every trick in the book to retain it, make you want to stay and want to work here. Now, I'm not saying that making empty promises that turn out to be false is the right thing to do. It's not. But what I'm saying is that in practice, a lot of employers and a lot of representatives of employers do that. So you don't want to get burned on that. I would take something that you can get that's tangible now over any kind of promise from people that could turn out to be totally flaky. But it's for you to decide. I don't want you to miss out on a huge opportunity if something was right around the corner. I don't know the situation. So you do what's right for you. Taco says, how do you combat ageism? Well, there's all kinds of isms, and I usually don't like to get into all this political stuff. But what I will say is, like I mentioned earlier today, people tend to hire in their own image. Introverts tend to hire introverts. Extroverts tend to hire extroverts. Technical people tend to see the value in other technical people. Salespeople tend to see the value in other salespeople, and so on, right? So if you're 65 years old and you're looking for a job, the odds are that a 21-year-old hiring manager is not going to see the value in a 65-year-old employee. But a 65-year-old hiring manager will probably see the value in a 65-year-old candidate. Okay? That's how you combat ageism. You go to people that, are older. The people that are making the hiring decisions are older. They're not going to turn you down because you're older. Okay? That's not going to be the reason they would reject you because they're older themselves, right? And I can guarantee you that they feel that they are more valuable now than they were at age 21. Okay? For a lot of things. If you're hiring to be a cocktail waitress or something like that, that's obviously not going to apply. It does depend on the industry and on the specific situation. But as a general rule, if you want to combat ageism, whichever direction, ageism against young people or ageism against old people, go to where the person making the decisions are more close to your age. Okay? Or just keep on keeping on, and sooner or later, just statistical probability, you'll be in that situation. But as much as possible, try and shoot for those types of things. Philip says, hi, Bill. I'm employed and I'm going to finish my master's soon. Congratulations. I heard that the raise on that point is small and that the head manager is belittling all the work you did for the company with nonsense. Okay? How do I negotiate a raise? Here's the thing. In technical terms, you can't negotiate a raise. Okay? You see, negotiation is not what people think it is. A lot of people think that negotiation is persuasion. I'm going to give you all these reasons why you should value me more, right? Now, if somebody buys into it, great. If they agree with you, like if they believe that the master's degree you took is something that's very valuable, very useful, it'll help, they believe it'll help you be better at your job, it'll help you make more informed decisions that are better for the company. If that's what they believe, great. They'll see more value in you. But if you're dealing with some person that just is walking into this thinking like, school is BS, the only real training is hard experience, and the only thing school does is it makes people more arrogant. They think they know it all when really they haven't done anything, for want of a better term. If that's the type of person you're dealing with, there's nothing you can do that proves that you're more valuable to them. So it's about persuading them. Now, if you know how to persuade them, great. But there's nothing you can point to because you haven't finished your master's yet. So there's no way you can prove that, you will be a more valuable employee when you get it. There's nothing that, here are the numbers. This was before, this was after. I made $150,000 more for the company last year now that I've made these better decisions. You can't point to that. So it's about persuading. Now, a lot of employers, I'm I'm showing you my biases. I'm a little cynical on this based on my experiences. A lot of employers play to this. You know, if as an employee you get more education, do most employers, upon learning this, go out and give you a raise? Most employers don't. They say, no, you were hired to do this job. You were paid. We agreed that I would pay you this much, and you would agree you would do the job for that amount. So I don't like this attempted renegotiation of our agreement. I didn't tell you to go to school and get this degree. So that's how they think. Okay. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they're wrong, and they drive away talent by thinking like this. Okay. But there's nothing you can do that like forces their hand. If they just don't believe that this thing you got is worth it, even when you do, and it turns out you're right, but they don't believe it, there's nothing you can do to change their mind. The only control you have is you either accept employment on their terms or you go somewhere else. So what I would do is I would apply for jobs. Say you've got this master's degree, you're a master's degree candidate or whatever, and try to apply for other jobs and see if you get any bites and see if someone is prepared to hire you for more money. Then you have the power. Then you can go back to your boss and say, look, I got this degree. I'm much more valuable than I was. I can make a lot more money for the company. Someone is offering me more money to go work for them, but I would still like to work here if possible. Can you match it? And if they say, sure, and then they change your salary, great. If they say no, you still win. You take the other job, you get more money anyway. So it's also a way of proving to yourself that, yes, I am more valuable because people are willing to pay me more for this, right? You may think you're more valuable, but how do you know you're really more valuable? You should be, but how do you know you are, right? So that's the way I'd look at it, okay? But you do what's right for you. You're not a slave to these people. If they don't believe that you're worth maybe what you're worth, you don't have to live with that. Do what's right for you. Go out and get a competing job offer that confirms what you already know, and either way it works out, you'll come out on top. Okay, so the best of luck to you, Philip. I have to wind this down in a couple of minutes, so I'm just going to answer these here. Philip, how do I negotiate a raise? Yeah, I kind of answered that. And thank you for answering. You're absolutely welcome, Carmiego. It sounds like Carmen Sandiego. I'm sure you've never gotten that before. But yeah, so there you go. Listen, I'm back every week. I do these once a week at the same time. So if there's anything you're struggling with or you're wondering about job search or whatever that I can answer that I don't, it's something that presumably I don't answer in my regular videos, come back and let me know and I'll be happy to speak to it. You're welcome, Philip. That's very nice of you to say. Thank you for being here. And that was an intelligent question. I'm glad you asked that. A lot of people are wondering that, and a lot of people kind of misunderstand the situation. So it's good that you brought that up. Henrietta says, still new to your channel. Are all your interview question videos applicable to all industries? Yeah, I would think so. I mean, they have potential. If you're going through a recruiter, certainly these are all the standard job interview questions, right? Like they're trained to ask these. They're schooled on like, these are standard questions and what's the right answer and what's the wrong answer, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, they apply across the board as far as I know. There are specific questions that I've answered in my videos that don't always come up. There's a lot of questions that are specific to management roles, supervisor roles, executive roles, like when they say, what's your leadership style? They sometimes ask that at lower levels, and it's just sort of a BS question. All you have to do is really BS the person because the person asking doesn't even understand what leadership is. So, but if you're an executive and you get asked something like that's a really big question. It's very important. And there's a lot to it. There's a very complex set of answers you can give, backed with all kinds of examples. Like questions like, recruiter type questions that would only apply to management are things like, what's your tolerance for ambiguity? Things like this, they only apply to management type roles usually. But yeah, they apply to all industries if you're at the same level. And there you go. So thank you for everybody who's here. There's 36 people here. You guys are awesome. And why do I say that? I say that because you are trying to improve yourselves. You're doing self-improvement. And that's the name of the game. The more you learn, the further you'll go. And that's what I'm here to help you with. So thanks for tuning in. I will be back in a week. Until then, I wish you nothing but the best. Best of luck. And I'll see you soon. Take care.